Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast. Steve, Ramona.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business and life with a purpose. Serving others, yes, achieving success. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, educated to make an impact in your world. Yes, your world. My guest is going to be incredible. You got to get a pad and pen and paper out. But while you're doing that, I want you to think about who you're going to serve today and how and what impact you will create today. Let's not wait till tomorrow. Let's start today. I want to thank my sponsor, pitchdb.com. Be a guest in over 3 million podcasts, speak at over 11,000 conferences, and much more. Build your thought leader platform with incredible opportunities to show who you are. With that being said, I always talk about impact. Just met John, but I've heard a lot about him, did some research. This guy makes a huge impact, but he does it from the heart, which is why he's on this show. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. I'm grateful to be here.
And I appreciate you jumping on. I'm just the audience, we've transparent. We jumped on, met each other, said, let's do a show. These are usually the best shows.
Yeah. 5 minutes ago, we were just chatting about the weather in California. And then it was like, let's just record a podcast real quick. So let's do that.
Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So with that being said, why sales and marketing in the first place?
Well, I kind of stumbled into it, I will say. So I think two things, right? I always wanted to teach. I always wanted to write and teach, like since I was a little kid. I think somewhere along the line, someone told me you can't make any money doing that. And so I internalized that. But I went to college and I got a degree in economics and Spanish, and I started working for an economics research lab. So I was going on this like PhD track, professor. I was going to be Dr. John or Dr. Meese or whatever, I don't know. And I was going to teach economics at school. But I got really frustrated with the fact that most economics is totally just head in the clouds, disconnected from day-to-day life. And so as I became really obsessed with like, okay, but how does this actually affect you and me? I realized that entrepreneurship is essentially practical economics, right? It's like taking these like big theories and actually playing them out in markets. And as a teacher, I realized begrudgingly, right? At first, I really resisted sales and marketing. But I realized that so much of my job as a teacher, as I built an online business, as I built an audience, was coaching people to make a decision, which is really what sales and marketing is it's, if you're approaching it with a servant's heart, it's coaching people towards making a decision that is in their best interests. And so I wouldn't say kicking and screaming, but I did at least resist like sales and marketing. I was like, no, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm an author. But then I realized like that's honestly the most, now I think sales is the most honest form of teaching and coaching, because it's like you're calling someone not to just say that's an interesting idea, but to put their money where their mouth is and to take action and invest in a direction that you and them agree is best for them. Sales
is every day. I just sold you to be on this podcast within 5 minutes. Let's do it. And I love that you said that in the teaching part of it, because sales doesn't have to be scary because you're doing it every day. So talk about, now that's the why, now the how you teaching and how you helping people.
Yeah. So I want to help you to listen to this podcast. I want to help you sell your smarts without losing your soul, to sell your smarts without losing your soul. And that's really critical for me, of saying, look, inside your brain, you have all this wisdom of life lessons you've learned, industry experience, whatever that is. And, I'm not the first person to say, hey, you could turn that into a course or a book or a mastermind group or a group coaching program, which are all things that I teach. But I want to pause and say, but I want you to do that without losing your soul, because candidly, a lot of digital marketing is really soulless. It's really about like gaming the system, like, bells and whistles and funnels and tripwires, even just the whole name, like the idea that the idea that in the internet marketing industry, a low price product that someone buys is called a tripwire. Who thought that was a good idea?
I love that. That's so good.
that kind of shows your cards, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to trick people into, getting into your product. So I try to approach things. I mean, this is also why you and I were introduced to you by our friend Julie, was that, a lot of what I do is I have a new book coming out right now that's called Serve to Sell. And it's right there, the servant's heart, is a core part of that. So yeah.
I love it, because I keynote speaker, and that's why we're brothers from another mother. I'm going to put it out there publicly, because I talk about, one of my mantras is serving before selling. You always have to be selling, because you're in a people asset business. I love how you just said that with the teaching moment. It doesn't have to be scary. So in non-business activities, what did you learn to help your business philosophy? Because people don't realize life can teach you a lot of lessons that can go in your business.
Yeah, as far as non-business activities that form my business philosophy and style, I think, so first of all, I got to give credit. You mentioned that we're brothers from another mother. Well, I got to give credit to my mother here, that I was homeschooled and given a lot of freedom to explore my interests. And so I read thousands of books as a teenager, and even as a younger kid. I would finish, what I would do is I'd wake up at 6 a.m. and I was told, like, here's your homework. Whenever it's done, you're done. And so I learned pretty early on to manage my own time, to get up, to get it all done. And so by like 9 o'clock in the day, I'm done for the day. And so then I could read, I could write, I could explore. And that really honestly formed a lot of how I operate now as an entrepreneur, where now, with very few exceptions, I don't take meetings before noon. I say very few exceptions because we're talking right now at 11:14 my time. So I made an exception for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I don't take meetings before noon, because those are like my most productive hours are before that. And then in the afternoon, I'm typically meeting with either clients or potential clients or partners. But I think beyond that, I've always been heavily involved in our church. I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and I'm actually like I don't really talk about this that much publicly, not because it's embarrassing, just because it's weird, I guess, but I'm actually a Tantra reader in the Orthodox Christian church. So I wear like a black cassock and lead Byzantine chant music at church and stuff like that. And that's always been something that's a key part of my life, but it's something that, if you just looked at my newsletter, for example, you wouldn't find a lot of signs of that. But the reality is, it's everything I do is motivated by this desire to teach and to serve and to love others. And that's really where my whole philosophy came from, is that as I started learning about sales and marketing, I mean, I can't count how many meetings I was in early, and I've been doing digital marketing online for a decade, which in some industries is not very long, but in digital marketing, that's about as long as it gets. Most people usually burn out within that time frame. And so I can't count how many meetings I've been in where somebody was like making a suggestion of some marketing trick we should try, and where someone, me or somebody else in the room, was like, are you sure? I mean, isn't that a little icky? And they're like, well, yeah, but it works. And I hate that. I mean, that's how you start to slip away and lose your soul, your personality, your integrity. And so so my goal is to help you sell your smarts without losing your soul.
I love that. I love that name. You could say a million times. It still makes me smile because it's so true. So we talked about sales we're doing every day, but the other thing about sales that I talk about, and I want to hear your answer, is decisions. We're making thousands of decisions a day. What coffee are we going to drink? What meetings we're going to take, right? All that. Yeah. What coffee, all that great stuff. So talk about decisions in regard to, your soul and everything that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so do you mean like how I make decisions or how I help clients make decisions?
Both. Because decision, I think, is a big indecisiveness is the biggest evil in business to me. One of the biggest.
Yeah. I think indecisiveness, and I would follow up indecisiveness with, what indecisiveness does is it actually starts to erode your integrity. Because integrity is when you do what you'll say you'll do. That's the simplest definition of integrity. Do you say what you say you will do? Or sorry, do you do what you say you will do? That's the simplest form of integrity. Indecision wears that down. The opposite of indecision is conviction. And so that's what I'm always looking for myself and for my clients, is how do we get clear on your conviction? That means we've gotten clear on how do your personal values and how does your personal knowledge and your personal experience translate into a transformational program that you are so excited to help people. You are so excited to take this program and guide people through a massive transformation in their life that you have the conviction to show up on a call and say, I believe I can help you. Would you like me to share how? And then leave it up to them. Because most of what I teach, I teach so I actually teach my clients to stop scheduling, stop booking sales calls and start giving serve calls. And I have a whole framework for how to give a serve call, is what it's called, which is, again, is why, Steve, we're connecting now. And a key part of that is that when it comes to the sales process, when it comes to what I call the recommendation, which is essentially the sales portion of that call where you're closing a sale, it's almost all customer led. And so most of what you're doing at that part of the call is giving away control with the conviction that what you have is so good, you don't have to force it down their throat, which is the exact opposite of how most sales techniques work.
Yeah,
So,
and people won't give up their IP. I talk to coaches and other people like, oh, I'm going to give them a piece of it, but I won't give them everything. I say, no, give them it all, because they can't do it like you can do it. Accountability, and there's so many other variables we won't get into. So you talked about people. We're in the people asset business. You're teaching people. What's the most powerful thing about be working with people?
Oh man. Okay. So I'm actually giving a keynote talk on this at Craft and Commerce in June. I don't know when this episode will come out, but a month from right now, I'll be on stage giving a keynote talk on how relationships lead to results. And this one requires a visual or some imagination, at least that, but it's that if you think about like the math symbol, like greater than, or when I was a kid, we would draw teeth on it and say it's a hungry alligator. You know what I'm talking about? So
love it.
So relationships are greater than results, right? If you just imagine that little symbol between the two of them, relationships are greater than results. So that is core. That's a core principle that I wrote on the edge of my desk years ago when I started building this business, and said relationships are greater than results. So whenever I got stressed about something, it's like, okay, how do I lean into this? How do I lean into the relationship behind this interaction? How do I build trust and rapport with the person I'm talking to? Or even when you send, here's the thing, even when you send an email to 10,000 people, 10,000 people don't sit in an auditorium and read that email on a big screen. 10,000 people individually receive that email one-on-one. You're having a conversation with them one-on-one while they're in line at the grocery store, while they're sitting on the John, not me, but the metaphorical John, while they're they're waiting for their lunch to warm up. That they're having an individual experience. And when you write emails with that perspective, what happens is when you approach your whole business with the idea that relationships are greater than results, what happens is if you look back at that same image, that same icon, it's an arrow. Relationships lead to results. That relationships are greater than results, and relationships lead to results, which is incredible. The most incredible success I've had in my career have all come from relationships. And that's what it's all about. So I try to keep that as a core reminder.
I'm with you. My last year is my best year ever because I built relationships over many years and cultivated them. Because to build a relationship, it's not about you anymore. Right? It's
not about a transaction. It's not about just what can I take? It becomes, you have to give. You have to get used to giving. I just literally 20 minutes ago just finished a call with someone who most likely will become a potential client. But the conversation started with her just saying like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you agreed to meet with me on Zoom for a free coaching call. I'm so stuck. I'm so overwhelmed. I need help. Can you help me? And we talked through a few ideas and principles. I asked her some questions. I gave her some tips and advice. And by the end of the call, she was like, okay, how do I do more of this? How do I keep you around in my life? How do I hire you and your team? And it's because it starts with giving. I wrote a book called Always Be Teaching, which kind of takes the same principle and applies it to creating content online. So like when you're creating a newsletter or, a social media post, I say that I'm actually not on any social media anymore. But once upon a time, I did create social media content, so I still have some experience there. But whatever content you're creating online, always be teaching is a core, principle that I take with that as well.
I love the teaching, building relationships. I don't like talking about myself on a podcast, but I will real quick. I got a call last night from somebody who I was at a chiropractor. The father was listening. This guy needs help with his business. He called me. By the time we get done, he was almost in tears. Like, I can't believe you spent 20 minutes and you're going to offer to meet with me in 2 weeks. I woke up this morning, $500 in my bank account from something I don't know where. And it's not about the money on this. I want to stop there because I know John believes that, but I know they're tied.
Yeah.
Because this guy, go ahead.
Income and impact are inextricably intertwined. Try saying that 5 times fast. Income and impact are inextricably intertwined. And it's true that you can't have one without the other. I think sometimes people try to go, now, this is actually where it's really important to talk about this, because we talked a lot about service and about impact. We've talked about all these things, but we do need to talk about the income is important too, Like it needs to be intertwined. So I had a client and friend years ago who built a business with one of the greatest impact I've ever seen, but he didn't prioritize income. And ultimately, it shut it down. And so, I mean, and just to kind of like break it down a little bit more detail, what he did was he started a podcast and a newsletter for people for adults who have bipolar disorder, who are trying to function in the workplace. And he built this whole audience. I mean, you can, just like 5-star reviews, hundreds of 5-star reviews of people saying like, oh my gosh, this changed my life. This is dramatic for me in terms of how this has helped me overcome issues in my relationship or at work, or find a place where someone who has bipolar disorder has manic episodes that makes it very difficult for them to build stable relationships at work or at home. And he was just sharing as himself with someone with bipolar disorder, what he was learning about that. Those resources is incredibly valuable for people. I met with him for a coaching call where he told me, he said, I have hundreds of messages from people who are saying, forgive me, this was probably dozens. 100 sounds like too much for this. But he said he had dozens of, he had dozens of messages from people who had reached out and said that they decided not to take their life because something he had shared had given them enough hope for another day. He had handwritten thank you notes the size of a novel that were telling about how he changed his life. And in the next sentence in that same exact coaching conversation, he told me was, I'm shutting it all down. Because after 3 years of full-time focused on this, it didn't pay the bills. Because he had prioritized income without a clear strategy of how that translated. He prioritized impact without a clear strategy of how that related to income. And ultimately that meant that his income, because it wasn't enough, his impact died. And so that's why so much of my business is focused on saying like, yes, I want you to have impact and I want you to have income. That's why I teach my clients to come out of the gate with a premium program that's $2,000 or more. And that's what we focus on, getting that to the point where you're earning $10,000 or more from that. Because now you can do this for as long as you want. Now you've got the cash flow coming in so that you can have impact. And you can go deep with a few. So that's why this matters. Yeah.
That's what's happened to me too. You're speaking about me. I made an impact for 15 years, millions of dollars of partnerships I did. And now I realize to receive the infinity loop. And it's exactly what you're saying. Impact can only grow with abundance. Money is part of that. People's and networks part of that. I love this. We're going to have to do part 2, just so you know. There's so much more we could delve into this.
I'm sure.
What I love to know is, what's your superpower as an entrepreneur?
So my superpower, period, I used to say this about like the Avatar, or not the Avatar, but the Avengers when they were new and up and coming. I mean, I still love the Avengers, but when the movies were a big deal, I would always say, like, if I was one of the Avengers, I would be the one that my superpower is I'm really, really good at reading the instructions and following them step by step. That's my thing. Like, I'm the one who, like, people come over to our house for a movie night, we pass around popcorn, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best popcorn I've ever had. How'd you do it? I said, well, on the back of your bag of popcorn, there's instructions. And I follow them. Nobody's ever read them. Nobody's ever read them except for me, I think. It's like, it talks about literally like heating up the pan. We're talking about kernels here, not microwave. Like in a pot, like heating up the pan with a little bit of oil at the bottom and 2 or 3 kernels of corn and waiting for them to pop. And once they pop, then you put the rest of the popcorn. I could go on, but that's my superpower. So the way I apply that to business is that I've spent a decade learning from really, I mean, honestly, the best in the business world today in terms of like, how do you build a thriving online education business? How do you sell courses, memberships, mastermind programs, group coaching programs? And then what I do is I reverse engineer that and turn that into a step-by-step process or system so that other people can follow the instructions too. It's just because the thing is, when I got into this industry, I was like, where's the instruction manual? Because that's my superpower, is like reading it. And then people were like, well, there isn't one. And I was like, oh, I guess somebody's got to write it. And so that's what I went and did. So nice. Yeah, that's my superpower, is just like the systematic step-by-step approach.
You know what's powerful about that? Anybody can have that superpower.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just not for you. Yeah, it's replicable, duplicatable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a few minutes here. You've got a couple. What's the name of your books? Mention that book you just mentioned, the other book that you've written.
Yeah. So I wrote 2 books before now. One's called that's my new one. One is called Survive and Thrive, How to Build a Profitable Business in Any Economy, including this one. My favorite review for that book calls it a weekend MBA, that it's like, basically, if you're new to entrepreneurship, period, it's a really useful, helpful book. And it's not just me. I mean, I interviewed the best and brightest minds in business today for that book. And so people like Michael Hyatt and Rabbi Daniel Lapin and Ray Edwards and Pat Flynn and many others who have all contributed to that book. And I'm really proud of it. It's a really good book. And then my second book is called Always Be Teaching. And that's an illustrated book, which was a fun experiment. So it's 50 different illustrated lessons or insights on how to grow your business by creating content online. And I do get compliments on the writing, but I get way more compliments on the illustrations, which is funny because I didn't actually make those. I hired those out. Like I hired an illustrator named Emily Mills from Flavor Graphics. She's great. But I did get some requests that said like, oh my gosh, an illustrated business book. Next time, can you make it one of those ones with pop-ups, like where you open it, there's like a 3D, like how can we make this more easy to grasp and understand? So my new book is called Serve to Sell, exactly how to sell premium programs with one free coaching call. Super excited about that. So those are my books so far.
I'm excited too. I'm excited about all those books. And I love that you have, you went out to a third party to do your illustrations. You could have done it on Canva or find a program and DIY'd it. But partnerships are so powerful. We'll get into that in our next show because we're running out of time. How can people reach out to you, John?
Well, you can't find me on social media. So if you do, it's not me. So I don't know. I don't know that anybody's pretending to be me on social media, but nor is that a suggestion. But if you go to sellyoursmartsonline.com, so SELLYOURSMARTSONLINE.com. I immediately regretted spelling that whole thing. But sellyoursmartsonline.com, you can get it. You actually will get a free crash course from me on how to sell your own smarts without losing your soul. And that's also how we can connect right there and kind of follow up with any of those, books or other resources you want to ask questions about. Happy to share.
All for one stop. I like that. We've got a couple minutes left. What's one last thought you want to leave with the audience?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good question. What is one last thought that I want to leave? This is just such a noble opportunity to serve people and to get paid for that. I mean, I think that's when I fell in love with the whole idea of economics originally, was just this, that our society is built on what we owe to each other. There's a story I read once about there was an anthropologist who went to go study a small community in, like, I think it was in Papua New Guinea, but it was like this rural community that hadn't really interacted with the world in a long time. And when she got there, she got put up in this little hut in this house, and everybody from the town came out and left something on her porch, a basket of apples or a chicken or a cow or a bucket of milk, all those different things. And she was like, what is this? And she asked her guide, like, what is going on? Her guide explained, well, you're new here, so everybody wants to give you something to welcome you to the community. She's like, okay, well, I guess I got to give them back something of similar value. And he said, whoa. You're going to give them back something of similar value? In other words, you're saying, I don't want to have a relationship with you? He said, you need to give them back something that is worth either less or more than what they gave you. Because if someone gave you a cow and you give them a basket of apples, well, guess what? You owe them. Now you have a reason to have a relationship. And if they gave you a basket of apples and you give them a cow, well, guess what? Now they owe you. You have a reason to have a relationship. Relationships are built on what we owe to each other. And so much of sales and marketing is just taking that to heart and running with it. So I hope that's helpful.
That's extremely helpful. What a tip off the top of your head. I talk about serving. You've just added to my knowledge. Thank you so much, John. This has been absolutely incredible. Audience, use the forward and reverse button in your podcast. There are so many tips, like that last 2 minutes. Grab that and listen to it over and over again. I'm going to do that. I do it with all my podcasts, and learn, write it down, or whatever you do with it. Because we would love for you to watch or listen to the whole show. But if 5 minutes changes your life, me and John are going to be extremely happy. We've served you.
Amen.
So don't not watch a podcast or listen to a podcast because it's too long. Listen to it long enough to where you get motivated, inspired, and educated. Don't forget my TV show, Together We Serve, Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. And doing business with a servant's heart, just like John's doing with his books. Why not wear that message on your chest or on your head? Hats, t-shirts, hoodies. I want to spread this message out to the world. You can help me do that by wearing some swag. And as always, I want to thank you all. Me and John thank you for listening or watching this podcast. We'll see you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.